In this episode, we are going to take a look on how to add Python components to our game object or to this cube. So at the end of this episode, what we are going to have is kind of a scene where we can rotate left and right our cube and move on the local y-axis. So the rotation is done using the A key to the left, of course, and the D key to the right. And it moves forward using the W key, and it moves backward using the S key. So, and it always moves in the local axis. So let's get started. And one more thing, in the next episode what we are going to add is also just some camera follow. So for the cube's movement, what I showed you, we are going to do Python components. But for the camera follow effect, we are just going to do some these logic bricks. So let me run it. And that's what we are going to implement in the next episode. So how can the camera smoothly follow the character, or this is some kind of a tank, let's say. So okay, let's just do this. So here I created this cube and also added this turret-like thing, and I'm just going to, so if I go to the wireframe view, you can see this is just this cube inside the cube. So I'm just going to do one more thing, is just select the turret, select the tank or this cube, so shift select and do Ctrl P, and so this will parent the turret to the cube. So object keep transform. So now if you take a look here, now as you can see the cube 001, I'm just going to rename it to turret. Turret is a child of this cube, and I'm just going to rename this to tank. Tank. Okay, and one more thing, I'm just going to add a floor, so shift A, plane, and let's scale it up by 20. And also just move this cube on the z-axis, so it is placed on the plane. Okay, and the last modeling part or texturing part, I'm just going to add to this plane, to the floor, texture. So select the plane, go to the UV editing, and it is already unwrapped, so UV unwrapped. So let's create a new texture, new. And I'm just going to, here generate a type, I'm just going to choose the UV grid. And the texture size will be 1024 by 1024 and OK. So it creates this grid texture. And go to the shading tab. The plane is still, or the floor is still selected, so create a new shader and also add texture and an image texture, and connect the color to the base color, and also select the created texture, which is this untitled. Okay, if you don't see the texture, just press this button, this what is viewport shading button, and let's go back to the layout and also select here. And one more thing, I'm just going to select the cube and add a new material to it. So it has already assigned this principal BSDF, but I'm just going to change the base color to, let's say, something like this yellow color. Okay, let's go to the camera view and also move the camera a little bit back. So press G, and I want to move it on the local Z-axis, so Z, Z. So press the, not on the cube, but select the camera, press G, and twice press the Z, so it will move the camera back on the local Z-axis. Okay, so now we have the scene prepared. Let's go to the coding part. So let's create a new window for the Python script. So just click here and click and drag. And I'm just going to choose here the text editor. Okay, and the next step will be to actually create a new Python script. So press here to this button, new, and I'm also going to save it. So text, save as, and I'm save it in the same folder as where the blend file is. So I'm just going to name it like component or my component, my underscore component .py. So my component.py and save as. Okay, so let's make here the font size a little bit bigger, and also here in this text I'm just going to change it to my underscore component. Okay, we can start with the coding. So the first thing what we need, of course, is import the BGE or the Blender Game Engine module. So import BGE. And the next thing what we'll need is just a standard Python module, which is called the ordered dict. So from collections import ordered dict. And under the hood, UPBGE 0.30 uses Python version 3.9 as far as I know. So everything that you have in Python 3.9, you can use it in your game projects in UPBGE. And the next thing we're just going to do a class. And I'm just going to, of course, copy and paste so that you don't have to see me how slow I type. So this class will be called movement. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it movement. And this class needs to inherit from the BGE that types the kx underscore Python component. So every UPBGE Python component needs to inherit from this kx underscore Python component class. And I'm just also going to do one thing here, just define some argument. So Ctrl C and Ctrl V. So args equals order dict. And I'm just going to define the movement speed, which will be 0.2, and also a turn speed, which will be set to 0.04. So when you do this, these will be available here in this panel. And I'm just going to show you a little bit later. And you should also overwrite two methods from this kx Python component. One method is the start method and the second method is the update method. So let's do this. So here first I'm going to overwrite the start method. So def start, it takes self and also some arguments. And I'm just going to remove this print. And in the start method, I'm just going to set a self.move speed and a self.turn speed. So this will be some instance variables. And the move speed will be equal to the args. So this args dictionary, args, and the key will be the move speed. So this move speed or 0.2. And the turn speed will be equal to the args. So this args ordered dictionary, and from this dictionary we are going to choose the turn speed, which is set to 0.04. And the next method we have to overwrite is the update method. So the start method runs only once when we start the game or when we add the game object. So in this case we are going to use the cube as the game object. So when the game object gets added to the scene or it's being instantiated, the start method runs once for this game object. And the update method runs for every frame, so 60 times in a second, so or every tick. Okay, so everything what you want to initialize, you should put in the start method, and everything what you want to call in every frame, you should put into the update method. So the next line I'm just going to do is getting, so just delete this pass, just getting the keyboard from bg.logic.keyboard, and also get the inputs. So inputs equals keyboard.inputs. And now let's define two local variables. One will be the move, which will be set to 0, and one will be the rotate, which will be also set to 0. And here I'm just going to ask, so if inputs is bge.events.w, the W key, and that values at index -1. So if this is positive, the W key, we are going to add to the local move variable, so plus equals the cell.move speed. So cell.move speed is 0.2. Now let's do the same for the, so this will move the character forward. Now let's do the backward movement. So if the inputs bg.events.s key, so we are pressing the S key, that values at index -1, so the S key is positive. We are going to subtract, so minus equals the self.move speed, or 0.2. And let's do the A key and the D key, so which will be the turn. I'm just going to copy both if conditions. So if the inputs is BGE events A key, we are going to add to the rotate, so plus equals the cell.turn speed, so rotate starts every tick at 0, and the turn speed is 0.04. And if the inputs BG events D key, so we press the D key, we are going to subtract from the rotate, minus equals cell.turn speed. Okay, and the last thing will be to actually, not the last thing, but do the movement, so self.object.apply movement, and here is the vector, so we are going to move it, so here is x, y, z. So on the x we are going to add 0, on the y we are going to add the move, and on the z we are going to also just set it to 0. And this says that we are going to apply the movement in the local axis, so not on the global axis. So this will move the character, so let me see. I'm just going to press, I'm just going to select the tank and add to this tank or this game object this Python component. And you can do this just by going here, select this icon, this Python icon or game object properties, and here are the game components. So first of all, let me take a look. So we have saved the Python script. So here is the blend file. Here we have the mycomponents.py. So we are going to add this component. So here is the game components add, and I'm just going to add the module name or the Python name. So my component and the class name, which is movement. So my component, which is the file name, Python file name, that movement, which is the class name, and OK. So if you have the same error as I had, that it said that it cannot find the movement component, just make sure to go to text and save your Python script. So that's why it gave me that error that the file wasn't saved. So save and then go to the this tab, so game components add, and my underscore component, which is the file name, Python file name, and the component class name, so the movement, so this name, and just press OK. And now it added this component. And as you can see, to this component, these two values, the move speed and the turn speed, are exposed here. So move speed is set to 0.2 and the turn speed is set to 0.04. If you want to add another variable, let's say, I don't know, like my var, and let's set it to equal to, I don't know, like 5. And don't forget always to save, and then here is the reload component. So reload it, and now you will see that my var is added with the value of 5 here. Okay, so now let's try to run it. So go here, press the P key, press the A, or the W, the S, so the character or the tank now moves forward and also backward. The next thing what we are going to add is the turn right and the turn left. So just press escape and go back to the text editor, and after the apply movement, I'm just going to apply one more function. And this will be the self, that object that apply rotation. And this is the rotation axis, so X, Y, Z. So we are going to rotate it on the Z axis, which is the up-down axis. And also set this value to true, which means that we are going to apply this rotation on the local Z axis. Here we apply the movement on the local also on the local y-axis, and here we apply the rotation on the local z-axis. Okay, and I think that's all, so let me try. Okay, first let's save the game, so save, or not the game, but the Python file, and now let's try. So press P and press the D key, and it rotates right. By pressing the A key, it rotates left, and it also moves in all directions, so it always moves on the its local axis. Okay, so just don't forget that, let me see it again. Just don't forget that first you have to create a Python script. I called it my underscore component. So here I also named it my component, and I added this class called movement. You can name it whatever you want, and this class should always inherit from this class, so the kx underscore Python component. You can add arguments as an order dict and expose these arguments here in this tab, the game components tab. And you should add two methods. One is the start method, which runs when the game is started, and an update method which runs for every tick or every frame, so 60 times in a second. And if you want to see how other components or template components, you can go here and you will find all sorts of here are just Python scripts. You should check these out, and here you have the Python components. And I already just checked them out, and I use these as a base for this video. You can also create an open shading language or OSL, and you can also create OpenGL shading languages, so GLSL shadings. And of course, if you add the game component here in this tab, just add and make sure that you add it like the module name and the class name. So the module name is my component and the class name is movement. And in the next part, I'm just going to add that camera follow. So as we will move the cube, the camera will always follow this, not cube, but I'm just going to call it like a tank.